Hi guys, it's Tara and welcome back to Crafting with Curly Cues. Today's project is kind of a fun one that is a little bit different. It involves doing some watercoloring and then putting this really pretty vellum overlay over the top. So to start, I have some supplies laid out here. I have a piece of vellum cut down to a little bit larger than an A2 card front, and I have the buildable bouquet stamp set from My Favorite Things. And I'm going to apologize right now, you guys. This stamp set seems to be out of stock all over the place, but hopefully it'll come back into stock soon. I actually filmed this a little while ago when it was in stock and brand new and all over the place, and then it took me forever to get it edited, and since then apparently this has been a super popular stamp set, which is understandable because it's adorable, and it's not in stock right now, but keep an eye out and it should come back into stock soon. So this stamp set has all kinds of these fun little doodly flowers to be able to build your own bouquet scenes. So I thought it would be fun to put my bouquet onto some vellum and kind of use it as an overlay on top of the color. So I'm starting with this largest flower with the longest stem, and I am inking it up with some Versamark ink. I first used my embossing buddy to make sure there was no extra static cling on the vellum, and then I'm going to use some gold embossing powder. This happens to be Recollections gold, but the Ranger gold works just as well, or any gold embossing powder that you have in your stash. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure there's no stray embossing powder where I don't want it, and then I'm going to heat set that. So I am kind of going in between images and heat setting just to make sure that I stamp where I want to, and that the next time I come in with the stamp, since I'm kind of going to be building a bouquet and going on top of everything, that I don't mess up any of that embossing powder. So now that that's heat set, I'm going to go ahead and take one of the other images in the stamp set, which is the very similar flower, but it's kind of got a stem that goes the different direction. So that's another thing that's fun about this, is because it builds a bouquet, there are actually similar flowers but kind of going different directions, which I think is pretty realistic for what a bouquet would be doing. So I think that's really fun. So I'm going to use this one and kind of stamp it a couple times. You can see I'm kind of placing it in random places, trying to decide kind of what look I'm going for. As is typical with me, I didn't really have a big picture plan when I started. I had a concept of like, okay, I want to make some flowers and then put it on top of some color. That was really all that was in my head. I hadn't gone a whole heck of a lot further than that. And frankly, that's more than I start some cards with, so I was pleased with myself. So one thing I am trying to make sure that I do is where the stems kind of intersect, I'm going to later be putting a bow on there, and it's going to be kind of the main thing that attaches my vellum to my background. So I'm wanting to make sure that the stems intersect not right on the edge of that vellum. I kind of want it to be a little bit more towards the center of the vellum. So I mean, obviously it's not the center, but I didn't want it to be like right at the very end, because that wasn't going to work for the one concept I did have in my brain. So now that I've got a couple, and you can see I stamped a couple that time, just because I wasn't doing them in the same spot, so I was able to do that without kind of messing anything up. And then I used one of those additional stems in the stamp set to make the flower stem longer, because I wanted everything to kind of hang off the edge of the page. So then I will go ahead and coat those in the gold embossing powder, and I apologize, that's kind of out of the camera shot there, but you get the idea. It's just embossing powder being put on top of Versamark, so nothing too fancy. I do take a dry paintbrush and kind of wipe off the stray embossing powder that goes where I don't want it. And now I've kind of jumped ahead, and I just went ahead and filled out that bouquet using a bunch of those images in the same process that I showed earlier, where I just coated them in the embossing powder and then heat set them and then just kept stamping. And now I'm going to add my sentiment, and this is from a different My Favorite Things stamp set, and that will be linked over at my blog and in the description box below. I can't think at the moment which stamp set that is from, but I will look it up and I will make sure that I link it for you guys. But it's just a nice simple sentiment that says have a happy day, and I thought that was just a good, simple, sweet sentiment to go along with this pretty bouquet that we're building here. And I just embossed that in the exact same gold embossing powder that everything else is in, and it will just kind of stand out against the background that we create later. So now my overlay vellum piece is done, and I am going to work on creating my background. So I'm going to save all that extra embossing powder that went into my coffee filter. Coffee filters are a godsend, let me tell you what. They're super handy when you're doing lots of embossing like this. And then I'm going to start busting out some of the supplies that I need to do the next phase of this project, which is the watercolor background. And so to do that, I'm going to use kind of a smushing technique and my distress inks. And so I picked out a bunch of different distress ink colors. I've got some wilted violet, some mustard seed, or no, excuse me, that's wild honey, wilted violet, wild honey, and then it looks like salty ocean there, and then some mowed lawn for the green. And you can see I've got a piece of transparency. That's actually the piece of transparency that goes on the back of the stamp set. And I just peeled it off and I'm using it for this, and then I'll just wipe it off when I'm done at the end and put it right back on the stamp set. So I'm just kind of making multi-use of my supplies there. So I have put that vellum over a piece of watercolor cardstock that's cut slightly larger than my vellum piece, and I'm eyeballing very loosely where the flowers are that I have stamped on the front of the vellum. So my idea here in my head was that while this would be a very loose watercolor interpretation of the colors on the flowers, it would still kind of coordinate. So there would be, purple where the flowers are and green where the leaves are and all that jazz. And I can tell you it kind of worked and it kind of didn't. So I didn't take tons of care to do this. There's lots of ways that you could do this that would be a lot more accurate, checking back in between a lot more, probably tons of ways, but I wasn't super concerned with it being perfect. I just wanted the idea that it was like these flowers and they're kind of colored in, but it didn't have to be perfect. I was trying to go for abstract, which is outside of my creative thinking box, let me tell you, because I'm typically, you guys know, if you've watched any of my other videos, I like to color. Things are typically colored the color that they are. Like, there's no purple kitties in my world. They're brown kitties because I'm pretty realist when it comes to my crafting. And so some of these really fabulous techniques that I see so many other designers doing, like with watercoloring that's super loose and, just really free form, I think it's absolutely gorgeous, but I have a really hard time personally creating like that. I don't know. It's just my brain just doesn't quite work that way. And I'm a little bit too, people, I do budgeting and spreadsheets in my real life. Like when I'm not being a crafty superhero, because I totally consider the craftiness my superhero alter ego, right? Like, so when I'm being Clark Kent, I am an accountant basically. So, thinking of this crazy loose watercolor is just like way outside my comfort zone. I want everything in nice organized little lines and such. So, but sometimes it's good to push yourself and step outside of your comfort zone, right? Like I really try to do that, especially when it comes to my crafting, because the creative part is I get such a rush and it's so much joy. I just love it. And I look at other people's work and I'm so incredibly inspired. And I think to myself, well, that's kind of the whole point of doing this, right? Is to connect with these other creative minds and be inspired by them and take yourself outside of your comfort zone and really push yourself. And I don't know, I'm probably being like way too philosophical for a craft video right now, but I don't know, this is a philosophical card for me. That was kind of the point. So you can see now how I'm kind of coming in with the green. So I've got all the color for the flowers on there that I want. And I'm now coming in and I'm putting on some green leaves here. And I am trying to eyeball kind of where the leaves are so that I don't get green like right in the middle of a flower. But even if I do, oh well, not the end of the world. I do really like how this watercolor background is looking. It's almost like marbly. I think I'm going to have to try a background kind of like this sometime with all the different small splotches. Usually when I smush a background, I do like a big area, but I like the way all the colors are coming together. I think it's super cute. So you can see when I put my front on there that I'm, close-ish to the pattern. I did notice that there was a big spot where there was that big flower right in the middle is supposed to be purple, and there's just like not any purple there at all. So I came back in and put some purple right over the top of that middle to try to fill out. There's my arm, excuse me. That's a super awkward angle with my camera. But there, so now there's a little bit more purple behind that flower in the middle. So you can see it kind of lines up. That yellow flower is kind of yellow. I kind of like the 3 blue ones up in the corner, and those leaves, they kind of work. And I was kind of playing with where I could put the vellum on the paper, because there's nothing that says that I have to line it up exactly, right? So I figured out where the flowers look best with my smushy background, and then I'm tracing over all of it with a pencil here so that I can trim later and make these 2 pieces exactly the same size. So that was the point of the pencil there. So now here's where I'm just going to wipe this piece of acetate right off with my paper towel, and that way I can put it right back on my stamp set, and it's good as new. Super handy, nice way to stretch your supplies there. And now I'm going to take some of the wild honey. I felt like there wasn't enough yellow, like there's just that one little splotch of yellow. And I'm just going to smush it on my craft mat, add some water, and then do some splatter flicks on there, just to add another extra element to the whole thing and to incorporate some of that yellow that was really only kind of awkwardly in that one little spot there over for that one flower. So I just thought that that was another fun way to make this an even more loose, free-form, fun, funky background. So I always take my heat gun to the back of my panel as well, and that kind of helps with the warping. It kind of makes it so that it doesn't warp up nearly as much as it would otherwise. So that is always something that you can do to kind of help keep your paper flat when you're doing lots of heating. So now I've trimmed both of those down, and that is how it's going to ultimately look when it is all done. And to adhere the vellum to the paper, I didn't want my glue to stick through, so I'm using my Tim Holtz craft pick here, and I used some craft foam as a squishy mat, and I just poked a couple holes on either side of where those branches all kind of come together there. And then I'm going to take some gold lawn trimmings here, and I'm going to poke that up through the back of my panels. So this is both my watercolor panel and my vellum piece. And I have to kind of go back in with my craft pick and make the holes a little bit wider, and I have to kind of push and prod on that, but I am able to get both of those through. And then I make sure that both of those panels are even, and I'm just going to go ahead and tie this on there. Now, this would be enough all by itself to keep these 2 panels together, and you could have a really loose kind of overlay that isn't connected hardly any spots. And that was my original plan, but I think that I ended up a little bit more in the corner with that than I anticipated. And so I do go in later and add a little tiny bit of multi-matte medium to the back of some of those flowers, just to kind of hold it down a little bit more securely, so that if it were to go through the mail, this particular card didn't go through the mail. It was given to a coworker for her birthday, so I was able to just like walk it in there. But if you did want to send this through the mail, it'd be nice to have it just a smidge more secure. But I do like that that front panel is pretty much just floating on top of that watercolor piece. I think that's part of what kind of makes this card seem extra cool. So I had these little gemstones in my stash. No idea where they came from. I linked below and over at my blog to some comparable gemstones for you guys. But they just happen to be the perfect size to go right in the middle of all these flowers. So I put them on every single flower. And then those are what I'm going to use when I apply my multimedia mat, because now I have these little solid dots on the front of the flowers, so I'm able to put just the teeniest little drop of glue right behind all those little gemstones and allow those to be what holds down this vellum a little bit more securely than just the little bow down in the corner. So now that I have that on there, I'm just going to push that down and let it grip. I really like the way that the vellum like mutes that watercolor background, and it's like you almost have to do a double take, like, is the gold embossing on top of the watercolor? I mean, it's kind of a cool effect. You can't really get the full effect of it on the video, but in person, it's just really neat. That gold embossing is really bright and shiny. It has, just really catches your eye, and then it's like you almost look second at the watercolor background. It's kind of cool. I like it. So I took some ink and put it on top of that string, and then I squished my string onto my craft foam that I had cut down to be the size to fit behind that panel. And then I just went in and cut that piece where the string left the ink on the craft foam panel out, and that is going to allow a spot in my craft foam where the string can poke through, so I don't end up with a bump right there. So it just prevents extra depth where that string is on the back of my panel. And I just thought that using the ink to line that up would be a good way to do that, so that I didn't have to worry about where that was going to be on the back. And so now I'm lining that up with the back of my panel, and I am just going to adhere that craft foam right onto the back of that panel there. I did notice once I got it on there that I had a little bit of craft foam peeking out, so I'm just going to go back with my scissors and just trim some of that up. It's not super pretty, but that's okay. Nobody wants to look at the side of your card anyway, so yes, it would have been much nicer to have had that be the right size in the first place, but that works too. And you could see there where that string had that nice little hole, so that, and no extra height gets added there. So now I'm just going to put adhesive all over the back of this panel. I'm kind of being extra generous with the adhesive because I want to make sure that this sticks really well to the front of my craft card base. So when I trimmed all that down to make sure that the pattern lined up with the watercolor the best it could, I ended up making it smaller than the front of an A2 card. But I like the craft poking out. I just think it ties in really well with the gold and then that gold twine. Super pretty, so you can see how that panel just kind of lifts off. So there's a nice close-up of the watercoloring and the pretty shimmer that you get from the little gems and the gold embossing. So thank you guys so much for watching. All the supplies that I used are listed below and over at curlycues.blogspot.com. If you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe and leave me a comment. Check out the description box below for more crafty inspiration and to join me on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. Thanks, guys. Bye.